Suicide Squad Isekai, we're 4 episodes in now. How are we doing? I'm Sasha, this is Casually Comics, and we've been going through this series as it's been airing, and it's been a good time. We're just doing some casual discussion, off-the-cuff style things. The episode comes out, and then we discuss how we feel about it. This one has elicited a variety of responses, so that's been very fascinating to observe as well.
Okay, so before we get into all that, could you please tell me the events leading up to this war?
When we first took a look at the series with the first episode, we also had a lot of quotes about what the intent of the creative team was, and so basically it was to create an entry point for both Western fans and Eastern fans, introducing the one set to DC characters and the other set to the concept of Isekai.
This is Alice in Wonderland sort of stuff here.
The Lewis Carroll book?
Though I believe the more popular term for it these days is an isekai.
Although, that is something that people are already familiar with, although they may be familiar with it under a different name. People use the term portal fiction, but it's older than that. It's an old concept. Just going to another world. It transcends across cultures, across times. What if you were somewhere different? The first 3 episodes were released as a chunk, so you could watch them all in a row, and they very much were meant to be watched in that way because they flow well. However, episode 4 is our first solo just by itself. How's it gonna hang when it's just gonna be one contained thing? Well, let's find out.
So, I'm guessing nothing's changed.
The last episode ended with the squad taking out the castle that they were sent to retake, so they did too much damage. They were too efficient. This in the battle against Ratcatcher. As more and more details have emerged as to what is going on with the world, and episode 4 is a bit more of a world-building episode. So far the strongest in terms of establishing just what's happening and the direction in which things are going.
I'm more worried about our necks. Time left, 12 hours and 8 seconds.
Although this is aiming to be a bit more generic in terms of how it's presenting the plot, it's much more of a character showpiece so that you can become familiar with the characters. So if you're not enjoying the characterizations, this is going to be rough. There are still some interesting things in play, and this episode gave more of a glimpse into the fantasy side of things.
If we have a role to play in the kingdom, what is it?
To bring an end to the war.
There's a lot more foregrounding of Princess Fiona and some of her motivations and her history and the hints going on there that are leading some pretty large breadcrumbs towards the idea that this is meant to be a kind of forever war that is being maintained on purpose.
They've done it, Mother!
Now, one of the things people have pointed out since Fiona arrived is that her and Harley have essentially the same design. And so many are waiting for some Prince in the Pauper, rather Princess in the Pauper shenanigans where the two switch places. However, as of this episode, even if that does end up occurring, they're doing a bit more with it than that. They're paralleling the two characters, and that has a lot to do with how Harley is being presented and the relationship that she's shown to have with the Joker in this show, which is so far a much more positive depiction than most.
I get it, honey pie. Nobody enjoys the sight of filth, do they?
It's still a disastrous crime couple, but it's much more presented like they truly care about each other, or that he cares as much about her as he can care about anything. When Batman isn't a factor, that is. So this plays Harley and Joker's relationship as she was awakened. This is her true self, and even if she is here doing things independently, she is very heavily informed by her relationship with the Joker and the things he's taught her.
You make the rats feed on each other.
Because there's a strong emphasis on him teaching her things that she is now utilizing to her advantage.
The trick-dodging rats! How'd I forget? You're a genius, Puddin'!
This is very much more taking the us against the world stance of Joker and Harley and less of the abusive stance so far. Because there are many ways to interpret it, and this show so far is interpreting it through a different lens. And that's a mild is going to vary thing. When it comes to Harley and the Joker, some feel that they don't ever want to see it depicted that way and that it's problematic and harmful. Others feel like with any fictional relationships, it can be reinterpreted and presented through different lenses, especially in a different genre, cultural setting, or just to try something different. The reason this relationship has come up so many times in these videos is because even though he's not there, the Joker that is, he does keep coming up. Let's add a yet to that as well. So let's take a moment to discuss this design. This design is another thing that's been polarizing to some people. Now, while it was stated that the personality base for this Joker was Heath Ledger's Joker, a lot of the appearance can be seen to be coming from the Air Joker. There's just some of that hot topic Jokerness coming through.
Blah, blah, blah. All of that chit-chat's gonna get you hurt.
I personally don't mind it. I kind of feel like it matches the vibe of this overall show, but for some it's just a definite no, get it out, don't want it. Both him and Harley look like you could buy their entire outfits at Hot Topic, so they're definitely matching. I kind of want Harley's hoodie to wear in my home in shame so that nobody knows that I bought it. Episode 4 sees the squad having even less time to defuse the bombs in their neck than they had before. There's a tiny bit more time pressure, but not that much. Fionn comes to speak to them, but she's not able to articulate what exactly it is that she wants. She's too timid, too quiet, and in fact, Harley really doesn't like her because she reminds her of how she used to be pre-Joker.
She's too damn timid to speak her mind and freaked out about what other people think. Like a little wimp I once knew.
This scene also allows you to get a few snippets as to the psychologist Harley, just that backstory, how quickly she deciphers what's going on with Fionn. It's a nice moment for her. The squad are summoned to the War Council because despite still being prisoners because of how much damage they did in the prior battle, it's still deemed that they could be useful. They're also there because we need people to exposit to who don't understand how the war is working so that we have a credible reason for why they're explaining it.
Our kingdom has been waging war against the Imperial forces for multiple decades. For a long time, they were mere skirmishes.
Rick Flag promises that they will help, and this time they'll do it correctly. They'll do a battle, and they're not going to do too much damage or anything like that. It's going to be good this time. This episode very much sees the characters more settled into their roles. They have definite places, definite dynamics, and they're starting to bounce off of each other quite well.
Gorgeous name. Wherever does it come from? Is it some kind of flower? Or from your folklore or something?
Yeah, screw all that noise. Look, girly.
In particular, Deadshot has a very good showing this episode. He has a little mini arc that concludes from the last episode with him and Ratcatcher, and he just comes across as cool.
Hey, you pulled it off. Nice work.
He was only 700 meters away.
Clayface continues to have an interesting characterization. Some people say that it's pulling from the Harley Quinn animated series, but it's also just pulling heavily from over-the-top, charismatic, narcissist actor Ham, which is one way to regard Basil Karlo if one felt like it. The scene of him trying to rizz up the princess lives rent-free in my head, and I just used the phrase rizz up. That's enough internet for me today.
I remember you sitting next to the queen. Might you be the lovely princess of this land?
The online brain rot is infecting me. We're all infected. The balance of the squad's attitude and irreverence clashing up against the kingdom and their more traditional way of doing things is very well balanced this episode. They play a lot with the idea that because they're from different worlds, they just have these different perspectives on top of just being criminals in the Suicide Squad. And it really lands. This episode achieves that feeling that it's going for, like you're just looking at the Suicide Squad in some kind of fantasy AU. And the decisions that they make and the way they shake up the way warfare is happening are well implemented, and they subtly show how things could have also gone on the other side, which has been influenced by the first iteration of Task Force X, or the Suicide Squad that was sent in under Rick. It is all still happening in that comedic tone, so if one was finding it silly, nothing that happens here will do much to change that, although some are enjoying how silly it is. Now we're entering the phase where it's going to be layers. We've defeated one bad guy, so we're going to have to start to unveil the rest. And of course, those bombs in the neck that still continue to be a mild concern. Speaking of bombs in the neck, one of the things that keeps coming up is Clayface and his abilities and how would that work, and there have been some fun theories, so I thought I would share some with you. 1. His powers function differently, and when in human form, it is an actual human form, and so he's transitioning between two actually separate states, and so were the bomb to go off when he was in his human state, he would actually die. Another, he's waiting for a big dramatic death scene just because he can, and that one, given how they're playing the character, there's a decent chance. There's just so many things happening with his characterization in this series. This episode definitely built up the intrigue as far as what's going on in terms of the magical realm, and that makes it more interesting to see how the various characters from the DC Universe's presence inside of this realm is going to impact it, how they're going to upset this balance, this very troublesome forever war balance. Despite not having as many big set pieces or moments, I think for me personally, this was my favorite episode because everything had kind of settled. the characterizations, the pacing, the overall plot details and world building. It just felt very secure in and of itself, as if it had finally reached the point of, this is what I am, this is what's happening, you're either on board or you're not.
Well, where's all the action?
Over there.
This episode made me feel a bit more fun. The fondness is growing. It's growing on me like a fungus of some kind. Look at King Shark's overalls, and he's still eating everything. Nom 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 nom. There was some good dark humor this episode.
We're friends, we're buddies, right? I've never even had any human friends.
However, there are also some various obvious animation budget cutting saving methods going on here, particularly around dialogue, lots of shots from the back to avoid mouth animations, wide shots with the slow zoom. If you're aware of such techniques, you'll probably notice them. Now, of course, if what you were enjoying was the more over-the-top set pieces, this may feel like a step backwards. Personally, to me, as mentioned, it feels more like balance is being achieved between the lighthearted tone and the story building and some of the more dramatic elements, but we shall see how it continues. The show certainly isn't afraid to be very silly, although I can see if one was waiting to see if it was going to get more unique and less generic fantasy meets Suicide Squad, then one may be out. Although by this point, the show very clearly has laid out what it is, so it should be fairly easy to discern whether or not something you're going to enjoy or not moving forward. Although again, maybe it'll have one of those dramatic tonal shifts, maybe it'll Trigun you. Another thing is that it still remains very Harley-centric. They are foregrounding the other characters a tiny bit more, they're having a few more moments, but on the whole, it's still very focused on Harley. She's the one developing the plans, getting the flashbacks, she's the one who has the connection to Fiona. So if you're burnt out and you were still feeling burnt out, this does play a bit like Harley Quinn Suicide Squad Isekai, like Harley Quinn the Birds of Prey type deal, and less team. But I have to say, I'm having fun with it. I'm excited to see them battle the rest of the other squad. Looking forward to see Fiona come out of her shell. Maybe she'll have a dramatic anime hair-cutting moment. It's light, enjoyable fare for me. But those are just my thoughts, and I want to hear yours. Do you feel that this was a strong episode for this series, or do you feel that it was the weakest of the bunch? Are you in? Are you out? Which character are you vibing with the most? Do you have any theories that you just want to share and talk about as where it's going? Why not? Put them down below. I'd love to hear them and talk about them with you. And please, while you're down there, do all the YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the bell notification that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking some time today to spend discussing comics and comic adjacent things with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.